Thank you, Heath. Thank you, everyone, for being here. My name is Matt Germer. I'm the director of the governance program at the R Street Institute. It's my pleasure to be a part of this conversation today. I have, like you, been in the crowd at a Principles First event in the past. Far more people here this year. It's amazing how much this group grows. I think it really speaks to the demand out there for a Principles First agenda. So thank you to all of you for being here and for dedicating a weekend to engaging in these kinds of conversations. We're going to talk on this panel about elections, and in particular, a conversation with two gentlemen who have been through the worst of it when it comes to election denial, when it comes to very angry members of their own party who have expressed their frustrations based upon lies. To get things started, I want to do a little bit of table setting about where we are on elections in this country. Some polling came out in the last couple of years around a trust in our elections that I find to be incredibly concerning and almost shocking. And at this point, you're gonna hear this and think, well, of course. But think for a moment about what it means in the bigger picture. 70% of Republican voters think Biden did not win the 2020 election legitimately.
Wait, what was that again?
70% of Republican voters. Along with my colleague here, Scott Warren from the SNF Agora Institute at Johns Hopkins, we've been engaged with conservative leaders across the country investigating this problem and trying to sort a way through this to create a conservative agenda for democracy, and building upon that agenda and in conversation with these leaders, creating a series of election trust principles, ways to engage conservatives and help build trust. I think as part of the start of this conversation, I want to share those principles with you, and hopefully we can continue to expound upon them as part of our conversation. The first principle that we extracted from our conversation with the Republicans was, as much as possible, conservatives should be willing to affirm that elections across the United States are secure, and as much as possible, try to avoid fueling doubt in elections, even outside of your own state or jurisdiction. And that can be a very tough thing to do in a political environment where, as I mentioned, 70% of Republicans don't believe Biden won legitimately. There are a lot of incentives for elected Republicans to, if not fuel the actual conspiracy theories, to do a little bit of, well, I don't know about what happened in Maricopa County. I don't know that, I can't speak to it, but it didn't seem right. The second principle we had was to engage in transparency and outreach. And actually, this is one of the topics that I think both Secretary Raffensperger and Recorder Richer can talk quite a bit about. As I know, Secretary Raffensperger travels around his state, holding town halls, answering just about every question he can with his constituents. And Stephen is famous for answering even the most ridiculous questions on Twitter. But both of them do a great job of engaging in transparency and outreach to help build trust. And the final one of our principles revolves around conversations when there actually are real opportunities to make a better elections system. It becomes very tempting to say we need to pass this reform or else we can't trust our elections. The danger in that kind of rhetoric is that you're telling people if you don't do this, it's not trustworthy, and that the last time when this reform wasn't in place, it's not trustworthy. So instead, to try to have these conversations in the spirit of continuous improvement. What we have now is secure, but we could always make it even better. Here are some great reform ideas. So with that in mind, I want to pass off to my colleague Scott Warren to talk with the Secretary and Recorder for a good conversation about election trust.
Thank you, Matt. Thanks to everyone for being here today. And just extremely excited to be in conversation with both of you who, in the midst of a lot of challenges, a lot of tumult, a lot of folks saying a lot of things about you, have managed to do a remarkable job in terms of administering elections and being spokespeople for the importance of secure elections in your jurisdictions and throughout the country. So now this panel is going to be about how do you fix that 70%. I want to start out, you, Secretary Raffensperger, you're in Georgia, Stephen, you're in Arizona. Arguably, these two states will be some of the most watched this year. How are you both feeling? What do you feel good about? What do you feel good about going into 2024? What do you see as challenges that your offices are really focusing on? Let's start with you, Secretary Raffensperger.
We're focused on making sure we have security in place. Our team and our systems are really battle tested. You have to go back. I took office in 2019, and we had probably 10 lawsuits from Stacey Abrams on the voter suppression myth, and then we had the voter fraud myth after 2020. So now we have a verifiable paper ballot. We're going to do additional audits, so we're going to do post-election audits of any race. We've also done a citizenship verification to make sure only American citizens are on the voter rolls, because in these days of open borders, people are concerned about that. And then we also now are making sure that we have photo ID for all forms of voting. So no matter how you vote in Georgia, early, absentee, or election day, photo ID. And that has elevated security, but also then given voters confidence in that. In fact, they did a study from UGA, MIT, and over 99% of people, really felt confident about the processes we had in Georgia. So it's really just to continue to do what we do, prepare. We also have some things that just added benefits. People don't think about it, but we make sure that to your electronic poll pads, you can check in as less than a minute sometimes, but definitely less than 2 minutes. It's really quick. And when you have short lines, it almost implies that they must know what they're doing. If you have those long lines, they say, if they can't do this, how do they really do at the end of the day? And so it just gives that another confidence builder. And I think right now, today, where we are in America, that trust and confidence is the true gold standard. If you can do things that add trust, then you need to really consider about that. Make sure you have fair, honest, and accurate elections, but also put in some trust builders. I think that's really important to do that. We've done that. And I think I've shown that no matter what happens, I'll do what's right. And I'll do what's right in 2024. And we are a competitive state. I understand that. And we have been for years. And I understand half the people aren't going to like the results, and the other half will be doing handstands. But at the end of the day, we're going to make sure we have fair, honest, and accurate elections. And that's one thing you can trust, that I'll always do what is right.
Same question?
How you doing?
All right, same question. All right, good, bad, and ugly. Good. Election administrators are really just learning how to do this. So you have to have a little bit of patience with us, because prior to like 2018-ish, not that many people cared about election administration. And so in terms of being able to convey accurately and hopefully in a compelling manner, we're just getting used to that. And I think we've improved a lot over the last 3.5 years. So I think for the 2024 election, we're going to be able to talk about some of those things that Brad mentioned, some of those securities, the fact that 93% of voting jurisdictions in the United States have paper ballots. We're going to know what to say and who to say it to, and the media is going to be a lot better equipped. So that's the good. The bad is those same members of the media will say, oh, Stephen, we see you do these tours. Oh, Stephen, we see that you do these videos. But then, Stephen, we see that 66% of Arizona Republicans didn't believe the election was fair in March of 2021, and it's almost March of 2024, and we see that 66% of Arizona Republicans don't believe the election was fairly won. So what are you doing here? And I mean, some of these statistics, like Matt points out, like we've still got a lot of work to do, and I think that it has become more and more sort of metastasized, fossilized, and so it's almost a matter of a religious conversion now at this point. And so we try to focus on the moving forward, wherever you were at before. If you were at a 2 or if you were at a 7, we just want to move you forward. And so, but that's certainly something that we have to contend with. The ugly, the internet's really ugly. The internet is, we're losing the internet in a lot of respects. And not only are we losing the internet from a communication standpoint, but we're also losing the internet in that it turns into a really hard place for election administrators, sort of rank and file election administrators, to go to. And we, as is probably well known by this crowd, it's documented that a lot of election administrators are leaving. A lot of Republicans who stand up for these values are exiting the field, either through they lose in a primary, or they just say it's not worth it anymore because I've seen what the internet does for me. So depends on the day. On Friday, I'm generally feeling good because it's Friday, but some days not so much.
I appreciate that. And we'll see how the Diamondbacks do this year too. See if they're around in October. So going off the 70%, given what you were just saying, Stephen, that the number hasn't budged in Arizona, what are you both doing to try to budge that number, even if it's getting 2 to 7 or people to be more confident in their elections? And I'm curious, one of the other stats that we found is that folks tend to be more distrustful of elections in other jurisdictions and in other states, which can come back to your own state too. But I'm curious, how do you all think about your roles in terms of building trust in elections, especially amongst Republicans that are saying that they don't believe the results of the 2020 election? And for you, many cases in 2022 too. Do you want to start, Stephen?
Well, you can't fall into that trap. That trap is very tempting, and Scott and I talk about this a lot, that, hey, this is how we do it in Arizona, but California, sort of thing. And so because while elections are creatures of state law, and they are highly federalized, and so how it happens in Florida might look different than how it happens in Pennsylvania, might look different from how it happens in Arizona. A few things are true. There is no jurisdiction in the United States that is run entirely by Republicans or entirely by Democrats, and so I try to hit home that principle. Two, there's no jurisdiction in the United States that says, let's just turn on the machines and hope stuff goes well. Let's not trust it. Let's not run any audits afterwards. That's a universal principle across. Three, there's no jurisdiction in the United States that just says, we don't want anyone watching this, nobody can come in. So there are partisan observers, there are international observers, there are political party officials in the process. And so I tried to say, in all those jurisdictions, these things are happening. Now, what do we try to do? We try to humanize it too, because I think it's just a much easier process to demonize when you don't know who the election administrator is. And so we bring people into our facility. We even do lunches with some people who could be categorized as election deniers. Brad and I maybe, don't necessarily see whether that's a good idea or not the same way. And we try to show them that these are just sort of normal human beings who are going about this mechanical process that is effectively just the bean counting of democracy, and that when you understand that it's this nice looking man with glasses and blue shirt and longer hair and you, who's administering elections, that you just seem hard to demonize. Yeah.
Take it as a compliment. Secretary Raffensperger, same question to you. How are you looking to build trust amongst folks that are not trusting?
I think it really helps when you tell people, well, just like in Georgia, every election official and every poll worker across America takes an oath to follow the laws of their state and the Constitution of the United States of America. And just like you, those are poll workers that are community leaders, and they just want to volunteer to do what they're doing, just like we have here in Georgia. And then I talk about what Georgia does. And every state has different laws and rules and regulations. But what I found traveling throughout the country is that most people are good, and those people are just doing their job to make sure you have a fair and honest election. But here in Georgia, I want to let you know what we do. We have 17 days early voting, so you have lots of options. We make sure that no matter how you vote, we have photo ID. Then we're also going to do additional audits this year. We made sure that got into state law. And then we're going to make sure those lines are shorter than 1 hour. Yes, we want to make sure they're shorter than 1 hour, and they have been. And then we're going to keep those lines moving so you can get those results posted quickly. We know how important that is to you. And that's why we're recognized, as one of the top states for election integrity. And then you just circle back. And that's what they're trying to do all over the country. Good people like you that are volunteering to be a poll worker, or good people that are running their county election offices, just to make sure we have fair and honest elections here in America.
I would also say, we don't ever say that elections are perfect. I've never met an election administrator who says, yes, 2020 was perfect. I've heard every election administrator say 2020 election was valid, lawful, and fair. But so I think that is a trap that they often want to draw us into, because it's an indefensible position, because there are imperfections, and also because it sort of says we're at the end of time with election administration, and that's not what people want to hear. They want to hear the ways that you're continuing to improve this process.
And actually, to that point, on January 6th, I was finishing up a letter with my general counsel, and in that we said there is no perfect election, but we've looked at all these allegations, and it's 10 pages of really responding to all the allegations. But we made that point in the first or second paragraph, because there's never a perfect election, and that's why you need to drill down, especially for our states, because every vote, it always counts. But when you have state rep seats that are 6 plus 6 or minus 5, they're that close, and you have then a presidential race that's 10,000, you got to drill down and make sure you squeeze out any inaccuracies. But we like to be upfront that there won't be a perfect election, but it's never been enough to overturn the will of the people.
I appreciate that perspective, and I think that's, we talk about the principles that we've put together. The third one is seeing improvements in the vein of continuous improvement. Not that these reforms have to be in place, but that elections are not going to be perfect, and we're continually trying to make them more perfect. Secretary Raffensperger, there were a lot of people that weren't necessarily pleased with the job that you were doing, so I read. But yet, in 2022, you won with huge statewide margins in the primary and in the general election. How'd you do it? And I think Stephen wants to take notes while you answer. So.
I live in Realville, and I came up. I'm a contractor, small business owner, and I'm a very conservative Republican, and so I understand all the anger, the angst that we've had in our party for years. But I also believe that most people are good, and you have conversations with them, that you then can share the details. And that's what I did. I traveled across the state talking to people that were in community-based groups like Rotary, Kiwanis, Lions Club, business chambers, even Tea Party groups. And so I've talked to those folks and county Republican. And sometimes I got a better reception than other places, but I never had any fear of going into the lion's den because they'll respect you for going in there. But I think you have to have conversations. And obviously as an engineer, I can back it up with facts. And so I tell people, in fact, if you want to know what happened in Georgia, it's real simple. But 27,900 people skipped the top of the ticket, didn't vote for anyone. And yet our Republican congressman got 27,550 more votes. And that's why President Trump came up short. There also were 33,000 Republican voters that voted in the June 2020 primary that didn't come back out and vote at all in the fall. And that goes to what the campaign should have been doing, is calling everyone to get them back out. And so that really, it gets down to the campaigning. And in our office, we don't do campaigns. We make sure you have fair, honest, and accurate elections. We follow the rule of law, and that's what we do.
Thank you. And obviously, it worked very well for you in 2022. Stephen, I'm curious, Matt sort of joked about this earlier, but something that we've heard sometimes is election officials saying, well, we know that elections work here. We're not sure about what happens in Maricopa County. I'd be curious if you could talk a little bit about why you think that happens, but what your response would be to that as well.
The Willie Sutton, why do you rob the banks? Because that's where the money is. And I think that Maricopa County, of the 10 largest voting jurisdictions in the United States, Maricopa County is number 2 behind Los Angeles County. We're the only one that's highly competitive, and we make up 62% of a highly competitive state. And so I think to the extent that you can have some bang for your buck, you can do it in Maricopa County. But then I also think that we are transitioning. We are a sort of political dysphoria right now in Arizona, where we had Republican rule for a long time, and we were called the Trumpiest county in the United States in 2016 because we were the largest county that Donald Trump won in 2016. And so it is not lost on me. Somebody here was talking about change in society, and Congressman Walsh was talking about how we need to be sympathetic to the fact that the world around some people is changing quickly, and maybe some of these narratives are appealing for that reason. And so I think part of the appeal in Maricopa County is that change is happening quickly in terms of our dynamic. Now, there are some other factors as well. I think that the border does stuff to people. I think that maybe the Arizona heat does stuff to people. I would say we struggle, and I know in 2024, y'all will be waiting on Clark County, Nevada, and Maricopa County, Arizona. Because in the western United States, we are heavy mail vote states, which means we have a lower percentage of our returns available within the first 24 hours, and those are the 2 competitive counties. And I really think that we need to have a conversation with the political left on if we are willing to force early ballots to be early, even if that means giving up a little bit of convenience. I think that would go a long way with helping people have a little more confidence in the process.
Appreciate that point. I know you've also made the point in the past that maybe we should wait for all results to come in.
No. I think it would make election parties so much more fun if we just said we're not going to release any results until like 5 days after the election, and then we're just going to hit the switch and everyone's going to know, and then the balloons could actually drop red or blue. Instead, now you're just sort of in this awkward limbo right now where it's like, at 72%, do we release a few balloons out? Or?
Well, but to Stephen's point, I wrote a letter to Congress and I had 5 points, and they've actually incorporated 4 of those points in the law that the Republicans are working on. But the other one that I had, the 5th point, was I think that all ballots should have to be in by 7 p.m. And when you have states that can send them in 2 weeks after, I just don't want to wait 2 weeks for the balloon drop. And so I think, and voters don't either, that's where conspiracies start, and it's just common sense. Because in Georgia, we give people choice. We're back to 6% are voting absentee. But every ballot, no matter how it's cast, has to be in before close of polls on Tuesday.
I'm wondering if I can chip in here for a second. And Stephen, if you can talk for a little bit about what happened, I think, in 2022 in Maricopa County that has led to the kind of like, I don't know that I trust Maricopa. The dynamics, as I understand it, around folks who might bring an absentee ballot to the polling place on Election Day, how that can interrupt timing. Wondering if you can provide some context for folks in the room about what happened.
Well, just generally speaking, if you drop off your early ballot, so if you get an early ballot, you have to put it in an envelope, and this is true of almost every early voting state in the United States, and you have to put some sort of marker on it, whether it's the last 4 of your social or your, I think, date of birth in Georgia, and you have to sign it. And if you drop it off on Election Day, it can't be picked up until after polls are closed. It has to be scanned in to make sure you haven't voted twice. It has to be signature verified. It has to be sent to a bipartisan ballot processing team, and then only then can it be tabulated. And so that is a process that people are going to sue about later. They're going to complain about if you don't do it because that ensures the integrity of the process. But they're also going to say, we want it now. And so, you know, again, going back to, gosh, it would be nice if we could just ask everyone to make their early ballots early.
Thanks for the explanation there. I'm curious, so leading up to 2024, you all have been, as we've talked about, principal leaders. We need more of you. But what more could you use from conservatives, from conservative leaders, from conservative organizations going into 2024? What do you need more of?
Do what is right, have a strong moral code, and really moral fiber and backbone to really gently explain to people what the facts are. Make sure you're strong on the facts. Do it with grace. But I think we need to have people that will just stand for the truth. If you look at our founding, it was based on some great ideals. And I think that's really, in many respects, I think I've talked about this, I think we need to come back to those ideals. You pick your favorite founder. They're all great people. They had great ideas. And did they get it perfect? No, but they did in one way. They said, you can change the Constitution. You don't like something, go ahead and round up a whole bunch of people and go through the process. And that's what we've done over the 200 and some odd years we had a Constitution. But I think we need to get back to those values and back to those ideals. Those are great ideals. And it's really what I think that's the heartbeat of what true conservatism is. It's about free market, free people, and opportunity for everyone. And then you make of your life what you can make of your life. And so I think that's really what we need to get back to. So people feel that they do have opportunity, that no one is actually, trying to slow them down. I think that would really help everyone.
Yeah. So amen to that. It gets lonely. It's pretty lonely. So show up, say something. Brad and I became friends in 2021 because, quite frankly, it was a pretty lonely time for those of us who were saying what we were saying. I want you all to have really uncomfortable Thanksgivings. I want you to have uncomfortable conversations. I'm Jewish, so I can say this, but like anti-Semitism, I think was more in vogue, maybe even 20 years ago. But I think enough people started saying at Thanksgiving conversations, like, no, you can't make that openly anti-Semitic remark. That's antisocial, and you shouldn't do that. And then I want you to have that conversation with, no, you shouldn't just go down this theory that is detrimental to our democracy because that is destroying the fabric of our country. And even if it's a little uncomfortable to say that to Uncle Joe at Thanksgiving, like I want you to be able to say, I want you to say that. And then I think show up to events and run. Can't cede the territory. We cannot cede the territory. We can't just have it be people who don't believe in democracy and then Democrats, because that's not a healthy system.
Thank you. I'm gonna, so in quick answers to end us out here. You all have talked about how hard this work is, how hard administering elections is. Why do you do it? Why did you decide to get into elections, and why are you still in it today?
Well, if it wasn't us, who would do it? And so we want to make sure that we really protect our constitutional republic, that everyone has the opportunity to vote, and we're going to make sure it's a fair and honest election. And when we do that, we actually honor our founders, but even more important perhaps, every person that has ever signed up and done military service and even lost their life. Why would you not do your duty to follow the law and follow the Constitution? When you do that, you honor everyone that has ever fought for this nation and ever given their life for this nation.
So some days I definitely ask myself that. I look to people like Brad, and Brad's actually been a great source of inspiration. But American history was my favorite class growing up, and I didn't really appreciate it at the time, but the sort of notion that you could consolidate 300 years of American history into this textbook that then had chapters. And then you sort of go back and you think, well, gosh, a lot isn't covered. And maybe it's just because we're living in this moment, but I firmly believe that this is a chapter in future American history textbooks. This conversation we're having about whether the Republican Party, whether American democracy, whether this notion of truth. And so that's scary, but it's also empowering, because if you are one of the people who is living in that moment, then you have an opportunity right now, and we have an opportunity right now, and that's a gift to change American history for the better, so that's pretty cool.
Thank you. Thanks to both of you. Please join me in appreciating them for the conversation today and all the incredible critical work that they do in their jurisdictions and around the country.